Yes, yeah, that's very true.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand if you're able.
You can have a seat. A life well lived. A life well lived is a precious gift of hope and strength and grace from someone who has made our world a brighter, better place. It's filled with moments sweet and sad, with smiles and sometimes tears, with friendships formed and good times shared, and laughter through the years. A life well lived is a legacy of joy and pride and pleasure. A living, lasting memory our grateful hearts will treasure. Good afternoon. We're here today to remember, to give thanks, and to release the life of James Edwin Patterson, who was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland on the 29th of October, 1942, and passed away in Burlington on the 14th of October of this year. August. Yes. My name is Brad Eager, and I want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of your time of remembering today. And on behalf of the Patterson family, thank you for being here to celebrate Edwin. Edwin was 80 years old. He lived a wonderful life. He is deeply loved and will be missed. Edwin was a son, a brother, a father, a grandfather, a dear friend to so many. I've had the privilege of talking with Edwin's wife Ida and his daughters Karen and Wendy this week, and I got to hear some of the stories of this incredibly kind, positive, hardworking, and loving man. Someone whom people just loved to be around. I have no doubt that Edwin loved each one of you dearly and would love the fact that you're spending this time together here today. Edwin's almost 81 years are a life well lived. It's one that leaves little space for regret. And so as we remember and celebrate Edwin, I invite you to let the sadness that he's gone and the happiness of a life well lived come together. And there are many emotions that come when we allow ourselves to do that. I know your hearts contain a lot of grief and sadness today, but I also want to give you permission to smile or laugh. That's not inappropriate. Edwin's life and these stories are worth celebrating. And I imagine, knowing that Edwin's great sense of humor, he would have wanted that for you too. Let me say a quick prayer as we begin our time together. God, you are with us, and in you we have all that we need. You said that you care for the brokenhearted and have promised to be near us when we call on you. And so we call, and we ask you to bring comfort in this pain and loss. We ask that you would give us the peace which only you can give, and that your goodness and unfailing love would be very real to everyone here today. In Jesus' name, amen. Edwin was born and raised in Belfast, and this was during World War II, one year after the Belfast Blitz. He was the second child of Herbert and Betty Patterson, and along with his older brother Trevor, they grew up on rations as the country was recovering from the war. One day, Edwin wanted to buy some candy, but he didn't have the necessary ration coupon that he needed to get the candy. And so he had to negotiate with his older brother and talk him into giving him his. Edwin was very resourceful in that way, and when you grow up on rations, you become a person that you hang on to things just in case you need them later. And I understand Edwin did a bit of that. Not a hoarder, but just in case. He was close. Yeah. Edwin started school at the age of 4 and had to take the bus all by himself. One day at school, he had a bottle of milk, which had a stopper in the top, and he couldn't open it. And no one would help him or give him anything to open it with. And so when he told his dad what had happened at school, his dad gave him a penknife to take to school so that he could open his milk and that this would never happen again. And ever since then, Edwin carried a penknife on him for the rest of his life. Maybe you've benefited from that penknife at one time or another. Any package, parcel, or present that needed opening, you could count on him for that. In 1952, when Edwin's younger brother Terry was born, his mother was bedridden for a time, and it was Edwin who became the housekeeper, became the cleaner and the grocery shopper and the cook, and he was good at it. And this led to a lifelong love of cooking. He could fry up a great bubble and squeak dish, I understand, and he's famous for those full Irish breakfasts. When Edwin was 12, he learned to play golf with his father, and he also joined the Sea Cadets. Edwin loved the water. He particularly took to kayaking and brought that passion to Canada, where he enjoyed many of Ontario's lakes, especially in Algonquin. And it was while kayaking one Sunday, on the Blackwater River in Northern Ireland, that he met a couple girls hanging out on one of the bridges, Eileen and Ida. Now, he was a city boy, they were country girls. And fast forward a few years, and Edwin married Ida at 20 years old on August 17th, 1962. And they were married just shy of 61 years. They had 2 daughters, Wendy and Karen. In 1963, Edwin finished his apprenticeship as a fitter, which I guess is equivalent to a millwright here in North America. He applied to the same company, James McCasey and Sons, who worked in textiles and machinery and yarn. And with that company, Edwin got to travel all over the world, especially Europe. They moved him to France, where he learned French, but then they decided they wanted him in Germany. So in January '68, that's where the family went, and everybody learned German. He oversaw the work in East and West Germany, Scandinavian countries, Austria, and Switzerland. So Edwin loved to travel, and vacations were usually spent at the sea, whether it was Mediterranean or Baltic or Adriatic. In the late 70s, the company wanted Edwin to move his family back to Northern Ireland, but with all the troubles happening there during that time, he didn't want to go back there. And so they moved to Canada in 1978, where I understand Ida's sister and her family had already settled. And they came here to Oakville for 10 years. And Edwin worked for a couple different textile companies before moving to Waterloo in 1988, where they lived for 34 years. And Edwin managed the factory for Strudix Yarn, which is part of Krause Carpets. Edwin would walk 20 minutes to work every day, walk home at lunch, walk back, and then walk back again at the end of the day. So needless to say, he was a healthy guy. Edwin was very active in retirement. His grandchildren were one of his greatest joys. Edwin didn't know his own grandparents, and so it meant a great deal to him to be a part of his own grandchildren's lives. And he was so proud of you guys. Edwin was always kind, always had a positive demeanor. And when his life changed forever 19 months ago, he remained that same kind and positive person. I think that speaks to his depth of character. This even had a profound impact on the staff at the care home. They loved to pop in and say hello and spend time with him. He loved when people would come to visit. Edwin has left an incredible legacy, but it's probably the simple joys of life that we will remember him for. Cooking, travel, the outdoors, kayaking, country western music. There were so many things that made Edwin, including that dry wit and the way his nostrils would flare a bit when he knew he was being cheeky. That was the tell, I understand. And apparently he liked to kind of throw a question into the conversation and just sort of sit back and watch everybody debate just for his own amusement, you know. But for all these little things, ultimately it was his love of family and friends that was the most important to him. And he cherished the time he spent with each one of you. To eulogize someone means to tell the truth about them, means to speak kind words about them. And I know there's many stories to be told and many fond memories that come to mind. I hope you got to see some of the great photos on the slideshow in there throughout the years. But we're going to get to hear some of those stories and memories now from his family. And we're going to hear from his son-in-law, Stephen, and then his grandson, Ryan. So,
Dylan.
Oh, Dylan. Great. Stephen, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. In case there's anyone here that I don't know, my name's Stephen Liptrap, and I'm Edwin's son-in-law. And that just feels so wrong to say. Edwin always treated me as a son, and he truly was a second father. We're here today to celebrate an absolutely incredible person. Throughout the 40 years that I knew Edwin, I don't think he ever had an unkind word for anyone. And when I say everyone, I even mean politicians. I regularly tried to goad him into a debate, and he wouldn't be drawn in. He would throw debates into other people, but you could never pull him in himself. Every person, every day, including the staff at the long-term care facilities in London and Burlington, all said how kind and friendly he was. Most people in his situation would have felt sorry for themselves, for the horrible hand that they had been dealt, but not Edwin. He was his kind, regular self till the end. When I think of Edwin, I think of kindness, always helping others, tremendous interest in family, and a pretty good rule follower. I know I definitely pushed the boundaries more than him, and that led to some good debates over the years. How many people know that Edwin and I are probably the only two licensed people in Ontario to make beer at home? Edwin was talking to a neighbor one day who happened to be a Canadian border agent. And of course, Edwin offered him one of his home brews. Well, this border agent tried to explain to Edwin, you need a license to be able to brew any beer at home. So Edwin got into panic mode, back to being a rule follower. And he goes, we've got to apply, we've got to get these licenses. Somehow I get pulled into this, even though the guy didn't know who I was. Anyhow, we both applied for a license, and we were granted them. Many years later, we find out that law was repealed in 1950. I also remember my first car. It was a 3-cylinder Sprint. And at the time, we had 3 very young kids, and Karen was going to university in Waterloo. So a couple of days a week, we went to Edwin and Ida's place in Waterloo while Karen was in school. And Edwin and Ida would watch the kids until I got there from work. And as a sidebar, I arrived to an amazing meal every week. Anyhow, as I was driving this 3-cylinder Sprint, it kept popping a cylinder. Well, when you're down to 2 cylinders, you don't go very quickly on the 401, and it's probably a little bit dangerous. The brakes also were not very good, as oxygen was getting into the brake line. And the seat was no longer held securely to the ground. It wobbled quite a bit. Well, for some reason, Edwin was in a panic around all of this. And my typical response is, don't worry, it'll be fine. Every single week, he re-drilled the spark plug, reattached the seat to the floor, bled the brakes, and they got me through another week. Kara and I always joke that we could just see him shaking his head at us, which he's probably doing right now. One year, I remember we decided we'd finish the basement, and Edwin and I decided that we could do it. We didn't need any help. I don't think he understood what I already knew, which was he would do the work and I would bring the beer. Many of you know that for close to 25 years, somewhere between 20 and 25 of us go camping for Thanksgiving. The tradition started when Kara and I were somewhere for Thanksgiving, and Edwin and Ida were alone that year. So they decided that they would go camping. Kara and I were so jealous when we heard their stories and saw their pictures that we joined the year after, and the whole tradition grew from there. Edwin invented, through some very hard lessons, a system that allows us to cook 2 turkeys over the open fire. Some years were better than others, but today it's perfect. Every year he would also bring out his camera and videotape everyone and every event taking place. He would then add that to the CD from the year before, so we literally could sit and watch all the Thanksgiving, which we did on a big screen around the open fire every year. Incredible memories. When we had our kids, I think Edwin was trying to figure out, how do I make sure they visit us in Waterloo on a regular basis? So he built this absolutely incredible play structure that the kids just loved. But in his very kind way of doing things, when we bought our first house in Oakville, he took apart that whole play structure, moved it to Oakville, and reset it up. Our kids were always bringing him things to fix, as I think they realized that Kara and I were in hope. One of the more challenging ones was when Ryan managed to break an inflatable dolphin. Ryan's first words were, "Granddad, fix." Not sure how, but Edwin pulled that off, but 2 weeks later the dolphin came back, totally fixed. Finally, I remember Karen's and my friends were so comfortable with Edwin and Nada that they'd regularly drop in for a beer, even when Karen and I were nowhere to be found. In particular, I remember Y2K. Edwin and Nada were hosting a New Year's Eve party that included many of our friends. They were working hard all day long to get their house in Waterloo ready for 20 or something people that were going to be staying over that night. So 40, 50 people coming, 20 of them staying over that night, Edwin and Ida working like crazy, cooking, getting their whole house ready. Well, Gary decides to show up at 11 a.m. instead of 7 p.m. What does Edwin do? Pulls out their beer, decides to celebrate New Zealand New Year's with Gary. Edwin regularly took care of everyone and took them under his wing. He made them feel looked after, safe, and the only people in the room. I could go on with stories forever, and I'm sure each of you has your own incredible memories of a great person that made all of our lives better.
Thanks, Steve.
I'm actually a bit surprised that we were able to gather any photos of Granddad, considering he was always the one holding the camera. I have a lot of appreciation for his ability to take the time to capture the moments in life while we were in them. To have the foresight in the moment to realize you want to hold on to a particular moment or memory forever. Granddad was always the best with that. He would quietly get his video camera and try to be as discreet as possible, so there was real legitimacy in what he was capturing. He would even narrate certain elements to provide the viewer with helpful background, such as the date, location, or any other particular context about the moment. He would then spend hours editing the video down, adding music and transitions, and organizing everything so that he could share or relive special moments with those he loved. He had such a unique ability to fully appreciate what was happening at any given moment, the beauty of the seemingly ordinary, but unfortunately rare times in life spent with friends and family. He always knew through the hustle and bustle of life that those moments were the ones we would all want to remember, and Granddad could take a step back to understand what that meant. He gave us all the ability to watch ourselves grow up and see the love we were surrounded by, and it's something I will always appreciate. When I was little, I looked up to him so much that I saved up my allowance and everything I could scrounge together to buy a video camera because I wanted to be like my granddad. Looking back now, that was a pretty damn good role model. Granddad was the best kind of person you could be. He was so genuine and thoughtful. He truly cared about us, what was going on in our world, and he did everything possible to help in any way he could. Whenever I was leaving to go somewhere, he would ask me which route I was going. I learned my lesson early with Granddad that I better have an answer when he asked that, because telling him I'm going to rely on the GPS was not a sufficient response. So I would start to pull up the GPS ahead of time in order to have an answer ready for him. He would always have so much information to share about whichever particular route, the things I should be looking out for, which areas might be busy, and where I should consider alternate options. It was truly unbelievable the incredible detail that he could remember about such seemingly ordinary things. There was one year that we were camping at Thanksgiving, and Granny and Granddad had sold their trailer at this point, so they were staying in a hotel. My wife Granny and I had some work to do, and there was no service at the park, so we were going to use their hotel room for a couple of hours during the day. It was about a 25-minute drive from the park, and he was able to recite to me every single turn we should be taking, either the time or distance between each turn, where we should go once we arrived at the hotel, down to the very last detail, including the number of steps on the staircase we would take. I remember him saying it would be 8 or 9 steps, and when we got to the staircase, there were 8 stairs, and then the landing of the top floor. I realized at that moment, he didn't say 8 or 9 because he couldn't remember. He said it because he wasn't sure if he considered the landing at the top an additional step. I couldn't tell you how many stairs are on the staircase at my house, let alone a hotel I'm staying at for a weekend. But Granddad's ability to remember and recite specific details is something that will always bewilder me. That was unfortunately not something I got from Granddad. As my wife can attest, I'm as unobservant to my surroundings as one could possibly be. Christmas is always such a memorable time for me with our family. Granny and Granddad would usually show up during the day on Christmas Eve, and the presents coming out of their car resembled one of those clown cars. You know, one of those little cars that clowns just keep coming out of, and your brain hurts trying to figure out how they all just fit. The amount of time, effort, and thought they put into gathering all these gifts over the year for everyone, and then Granddad would always pick a couple that he would make incredibly challenging to open just for fun. We would come running down to open our stockings Christmas morning, and there was Granddad with the video camera capturing the entire morning. Later in the day, we would have a big bumper pool tournament with the whole family, and you were always in trouble if you overlooked Granddad in the competition. He didn't have any particularly special skill to make overly impressive shots, but he was so calm and patient, and he would think through every move, that eventually he would wear down his opponents through defense and perseverance. And if you ever got impatient and tried to rush through something, that's when he'd get you. I really believe that was pretty emblematic of who Granddad was as a person. Patient, methodical, well thought out, but never boastful if he won. You wouldn't see any change on his face except the little smirk he would get. The same look as the one when he would tell a dorky joke with a straight face, and his lip would curl and nose would flare up as he'd watch you try to figure out what he just said. One of my favorites was his classic at a restaurant where he would call over the server after he finished his beer to let them know there was something wrong with it. They would get a panicked look in their eyes, trying to figure out why he would finish his entire beer if something was wrong with it. Then he would tell them it seemed to have evaporated. He loved to make those kinds of lighthearted jokes where he could make someone slightly uncomfortable for just a moment or two. But you could always tell the excitement was coming through the flare in his nose. I'm sure most of you know exactly what I'm referring to. One of my favorite trips of my life was a Canadian East Coast road trip with Granny and Granddad when I was around 13. We traveled in the famous truck and trailer that I'm sure everyone here is familiar with, and we drove to the Maritimes, along the east coast of the country, stopping at different campgrounds in the evening. It was unbelievable how little time it took from the moment we parked until Granddad had the trailer set up, a roaring fire going with dinner cooking over top of it, sitting in his chair next to Granny reading a book and drinking a beer. We would try to help, but unless Granddad specifically delegated a job, it was always easier if he just stayed out of the way, because his routine was a methodically practiced, well-oiled machine. During the days, we experienced absolutely breathtaking, beautiful scenery in which I would manage to catch a glimpse of between my third and fourth viewing of Super Troopers that day, since we only had about 4 movies to rotate through on the little TV they had set up for me in the back seat. I can't remember whether the kayaks came with us on that trip, but I'd be surprised if they didn't. There were few things Granddad enjoyed more than being out in the middle of the water. He had these long, powerful strokes that would propel the boat forward, while it looked like he was calmly resting. Meanwhile, I would be paddling like crazy in the kayak behind him, my scrawny little teenage arms burning trying to keep up. Sometimes, if we were lucky, we would see a bear or a deer along the edge of the water, and it was just so peaceful to just sit there in his presence. Granddad's relationship with nature was really something. The more I reflect on him as a person and what his priorities were in life, the more I realize he had it all figured out. It was never about chasing more, but just truly appreciating what he had and the beauty of what life had to offer. I could probably stand up here and tell stories about how amazing my grandfather was, but I think everyone here already knew that about him. I'm just so grateful for all the time we had together. I love you, Granddad. Thank you so much for everything.
Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate you sharing your heart today. Today is a day of many things, many thoughts, and many feelings. Today's a time to say thank you for what Edwin meant to you personally, and for how his life has impacted yours. Edwin loved this family deeply, and in remembering his life, there's much to be thankful for. May we be truly grateful for the memories of him that we will always carry with us. Today is a time to say goodbye. In many ways, I know you've been letting go of the life that was slowly over the last 19 months or so. And some of you got a chance to visit and tell them things, and say goodbye. And that's a real gift. But I know not everyone got to do that. And that can leave us feeling like there's things that maybe we wish we could have got a chance to tell them. As we gather here today and we know we have to let him go and release him in our own hearts and minds, I believe that knowing Edwin's love for all of you, that he already knew in his heart everything that you would have wanted him to know. And may that be a comfort to us as we say goodbye here today. Today is a time to mourn. In talking with Ida and Karen and Wendy this week, we talked about Edwin's amazing life, all these great stories. I felt like I got to know him a bit. But it was also very sad to realize that the world has lost such a wonderful person. This is a loss, and a difficult one. May we take that sadness that's in our hearts and grieve well, supporting one another in our mourning, giving one another the grace to have good days and bad days, to laugh or to cry. This is healthy, and it's necessary. And the relationship that we've lost with Edwin is worth grieving. Today's a time to reflect. As we've been sharing these memories of Edwin's life, we begin to reflect on what life itself is. Edwin's hard work, his kindness, the joy he took in family and friends and nature are a great example to all of us of a life done right. May we carry his example with us as we seek to discover our true purposes and we live out our lives. Finally, today is a time to be together. And not just today, but tomorrow and next week, next month. These are times to continue to come together to support each other, whether it's over the phone or around the dinner table. any journey through sadness requires others to walk that road with us. And that's why we're here today, and why I hope you'll take time to gather together, maybe over a big Irish breakfast, to talk and share more of these stories. And as you do, I think you'll discover that the life of Edwin Patterson lives on in each of you. As we've spent these moments today, all these memories of Edwin cause us to reflect, and we're reminded what a precious gift life is. And now, as we release the life of this dearly loved man, let's take a moment of silence to remember James Edwin Patterson, reflect on his life, and say goodbye. Let's take a moment now. Father God, thank you that you never once left Edwin's side. Thank you that you have taken him by the hand and have made him whole. Thank you that he continues to live in your eternal love and presence as he did since the day he came into being. We give you thanks for his life and for the love he shared with us. Pray for Edwin's family and ask for your comfort in this time of grief. Help us to say goodbye and to grieve well, knowing that we can turn to you in all things and at all times to find the love, hope, joy, forgiveness, and peace we all need. Amen. After we're finished in the chapel here, there's a reception downstairs that the family invites you to join them in. There's also an elevator right here if anyone needs to use that. Stephanie will be there to assist with that. Dear Patterson family and dear friends, may you find joy and comfort in your memories and stories. May you find support and strength in your love for each other, and may you know the depths of love that Edwin had for you. Peace be with you.